On today's Palace of Pistons podcast, do the Pistons have another move in the tank? Will they make a trade? Will they make a free agency signing? What are they going to do with Jaden Ivey? Back in trade rumors, back in trade reports. Are they going to trade him? Are they going to start him? Will they bring him off the bench? And we're talking about the Summer League Pistons, Ron Holland, Marcus Sasser, Bobi Klintman, and more. All of that on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. Let's go.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing. Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
And we're back here on the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. Myself, Aaron Johnson. I'm back for the show this week. Missed it last week, but Mike and Jasper held it down. And Jasper is joining me here today. Jasper, we've got a lot to cover. I know we're ready to get right into it. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing great, but I know I'm not doing as well as you are. It is your favorite time of the year. It is Aaron's personal Christmas in July. It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's Summer League season, baby. And I know you're going to have plenty to talk about that. I just think that it's what you're made for, man. Summer League is your calling. It's this and, the new college football game. So, yeah, I'm happy to be here. And honestly, man, I'm happy for you.
I am pumped to talk about Summer League. If you've listened to the show and any of the past summers, you know that it's something that I really get up for, and excited to talk about that. We've got some other topics that we're going to talk about before we talk about Summer League. But before we get into those topics, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor this week, BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit of up to $250. Bet online, the game starts here. Okay, so before we get into our first topic, a quick shout out to the Palace of Pistons Substack. Please go over to palaceofpistons.com. It's in the episode description, wherever you're watching or listening from, and subscribe to our Substack. It's free. It takes 30 seconds, and you'll get our content directly to your email inbox every minute it's posted. Now I'm ready to get into it. We've done a lot of teasing. Let's get into our first topic, and it's all about Jaden Ivey. What should the Pistons do with Jaden Ivey? He has had a very up and down career through his first two seasons with the Pistons. There have been more reports and more rumors circulating that Detroit could still move off of Ivey, or potentially another young player like a Marcus Sasser. Isaiah Stewart's certainly been in plenty of trade talks and discussions as well. But I really want to focus on Jaden Ivey here, because outside of Cade Cunningham, I think if you had to ask, he's still the other player on this team with the highest upside potential if everything hit for him. But he's being talked about in trade talks now to where I think there's a legitimate possibility he gets dealt. And I'm curious if that's what everyone thinks is the right decision. Should the Pistons be moving on from Jaden Ivey after just two seasons where he's played with two coaches in his first 2 years? He did not have to play with Cade Cunningham in his first season. In his second season, he started coming off the bench, then got to play with Cade Cunningham a little bit, was on a disastrous team led by a disastrous head coach, has had some really, really bright moments, a lot of bright moments in his rookie year, a lot of low moments, especially in year two. I want to know what the pulse is on Jaden Ivey. Should the Pistons be trading him? Should they be starting him next year alongside Cade Cunningham? Does it make sense to bring him off the bench next year? I'm curious what everyone thinks. definitely want to hear what the people have to say in the comments. But right now, Jasper, I want to start with you on what you think.
It's a difficult question. It's a very difficult question because you're right. Jaden Ivey does still have a very high ceiling. And we saw that at times last year. Yes, it was a struggle at points. He had to deal with a lot just starting off the season where Monty Williams was refusing to play him. He was in and out of the lineup. He had hot streaks. He had cold streaks. There was times where he looked absolutely unstoppable. There was times where he absolutely could not stop anyone else defensively. I think for me, the way I look at it, I would like to bring Ivy off of the bench to start this year. I think it's worth taking a look to see what you have. And frankly, the reason I think he hasn't been dealt so far is because there simply isn't a trade market for it. And this kind of bleeds into our second topic here, which is what the Pistons are going to do in free agency. If you look at the free agency list, the guys who are still out there, you still have Tyus Jones, you still have Markelle Fultz, out there, Dennis Smith Jr. even out there on in free agency. There's just not that much of a demand for guards as of right now. Like, it just isn't a big market for guards. There's so many good guards in the NBA. And I think the issue with where Jaden Ivey is at right now is that people look at him and they say, this is a guy with potential, but it hasn't come together for him consistently, really outside of like a 3-month stretch in his rookie year. It just hasn't really put it together. I just don't see there being much of a trade market for him right now. And I think the reason why the Pistons haven't moved off of him is because it behooves them more to try and rehab that trade value a little bit before they try and move on, or at least see what they have. Both he and Jalen Duren up for extensions next season. I just don't think that there's a need to move on from Jaden Ivey at this point if you're not going to get anything of real value back. I mean, what, a top 20 protected lottery pick? I just don't see that as being worth it if you can put together a reasonably consistent stretch with him, if you can show some of that high upside that he's flashed at points but hasn't really been able to put together with Cade Cunningham. I think that it just opens so many more doors for you. Whether you decide to trade him or whether you decide to keep him, it makes the decision a lot easier. And look, if the trade value is low now, is it really going to be that much lower if he doesn't, show the ability to create a partnership with Cade, or if he doesn't show the ability to come off the bench and be a good backup guard? I don't think there's really any downside to keeping him on the roster as of this point. So for me, yeah, I'm fine with where they're at with Jaden Ivey. Look, this is still, and I know people are like going to be like, oh, well, the team, like, what are they doing? Zach Lowe and Kevin Pelton talked about it on the Low Post. They're like, I don't get the pairing. It's like, well, you don't really need to get the pairing fully. That's not what this year is about. They are not going to be a playoff team. They are most likely not going to be a play-in team. That's like, if everything goes right, they could compete for a play-in spot. Maybe, possibly, who knows? This is an evaluation year. And that's what the Pistons should be focusing on in regards to Jaden Ivey. Evaluating where he is as a player, evaluating what his fit is with this team, evaluating what his trade market could be. For me, I just think that that's the best thing they can do as of right now, because Cade Cunningham has to be the priority. Cade Cunningham must be the priority. And frankly, Asar Thompson needs to be a bigger priority in my eyes over Jaden Ivey at this point in time as well. And the way that you do that the best is by surrounding those guys with shooting. Because Jalen Duren's going to be the starting center regardless. I think we know that, despite the good and bad of the Jalen Duren experience. And the best way to do that is put guys like Harris, Beasley, Fontecchio out there on the floor. And I just think that by necessity relegates Jaden Ivey to a bench role for now. But if he can show a little bit more, I could see that role expanding. Aaron, I'm interested to see what your, feeling on this is as well, because I do think it's a complicated question with a lot of different answers that are all very defensible.
I'm with you and I'm not with you. I'm with you on the standpoint that I think the Pistons should be keeping Jaden Ivey unless he's capable of netting them that big time piece, that all-star type of player. Brandon Ingram, a guy that's been in and out of rumors with the Pistons for months. It feels like at this point it's a lot more fan generated than it is reporting generated at this point. But it's like if he was able to net you in a package to get Brandon Ingram, then fine. I think that could make sense. But I don't think he has that type of value, at least not alone. And then you're talking about other variables where it's like, you want to include Ivy and Duran and something else in a deal to get this, 27-year-old one-time All-Star, whatever. The point being, I think it's worth holding on to Ivy right now and seeing that if JB Bickerstaff, if this new coaching staff can unlock him like he was really in his first year in the league. Where I differ is I think Jaden Ivey should be in the starting lineup. I think you have to figure out if this guy is capable of being a core piece, if he is capable of being featured in a backcourt with Cade Cunningham, and that will tell you if he is worth that second contract he's going to be eligible for next offseason. You may not get the answer that you want. You may find out he's not cut out for it, but I don't think you can risk not finding that out, especially when, like you said, this very likely isn't going to be a playoff team next year, despite a much improved roster. I would like to know if Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey can play together. I don't think you can look at last season and really truly gauge if there was any upside, downside progress, regression there, because they were playing for a coach that just, quite frankly, was not in it to compete. So I want to see them get a chance to play together. I still believe there's a good player in Jaden Ivey. He just showed too much in his rookie season to just not be a worthwhile NBA player. And yes, there could be a role for him to come off the bench and maybe lead that second unit as the lead guard. And, if that ends up being what his trajectory is, yeah, that's good and that's fine. It obviously changes the landscape of what his second contract would need to look like if he were to stay with the Pistons. But I think to start the year, I'd like to see if Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey can play together. And I think maybe that played a small role, maybe a large role in the decision to bring in JB Bickerstaff, a guy that has worked with two guards, Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and has had to try to figure out the best way to optimize both those guys. I think from what he said, there's a belief in him that he's going to start both those guys and kind of try to utilize them in the same way that he used Mitchell and Garland, always having one of them on the court, allowing them to both have turns with the ball in their hands, the other playing off the ball a little bit. So I think that's another part in it as well. And that's what is what interested me a lot in the Bickerstaff signing, is because he does have that experience with playing two guards together that are high potential, need the ball in their hands, and are good offensive players. So that's where I'm at with Ivy.
My question for you then is, you're bringing Ausar Thompson off the bench in that case? Because I don't think you can play Duran, Ivy, and Ausar all together and only have, Tobias Harris like as the one spot up shooter there.
Yes, I would be bringing Ausar Thompson off the bench. I think you have a couple veteran forwards in Fontecchio and Tobias Harris. Weird calling Fontecchio a veteran, considering he's also only going into his third year like Jaden Ivey in the NBA, but he has a ton of overseas experience as well. But I think both of them give you the floor spacing that you need. Both of them, although not being great defenders, are adequate on that side of the floor. And look, I don't know if Ausar Thompson and Jalen Duran is a capable starting pairing right now, considering both of them are very much non-shooters. I do think Ausar Thompson has a bright future in the league, but I don't know if he's a starter right now if he can't help you on the offensive side of the floor. And he's just very clearly, at least not as of last year, was not a contributor on that end. And they have another non-floor spacer in Duran out there that just, I don't want to bog down the floor with lack of spacing. I think this is the first time Detroit has a real opportunity to really maximize the lineup around Cunningham and Ivy to a degree as well, with Fontecchio, with Harris, with Malik Beasley, with Tim Hardaway Jr. So I think I'd like to see Cunningham and Ivy start in the backcourt. And I think my two forward spots, if I were making the decision, would be Fontecchio and Harris, and seeing if putting that spacing, putting that size around Cunningham and Ivy can yield you good results.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, isn't it? Because there's so many different lineups that you can envision here. All of them have their flaws. All of them have their upsides. Like, I do disagree with you a little bit about Asar Thompson in terms of like his offensive abilities. I think he was hindered by the lineups they had around him. I think when Asar Thompson is able to crash the offensive glass, when he's able to cut, when he's able to get into the lane and shoot his turnaround jumper, like his mid-range turnaround is a good shot, in my opinion. I think that's only a shot that's going to get better with time for him, regardless of the three-pointer. So for me, I can see like, hey, if you have Cunningham and Beasley and Harris out there next to him, along with Duren, okay, maybe that's enough shooting to open up some space. We also, on the other hand, though, saw Duren Thompson pairings not play all that well together. And Thompson played much better with Isaiah Stewart, which makes sense because Isaiah Stewart can actually space the floor to a certain extent. Or at least, even if teams aren't, glued on him onto the perimeter, he's not like Jalen Duren in the sense that he's going to be posted in the paint at all times, or he's going to be at the top of the key, setting a pick or doing dribble handoff actions, and then crashing towards the rim. That's just one of those things that like closes off the space for Asar to do the things that he's currently best at. So I see the argument in bringing Asar off the bench and saying, hey, let's play with Stewart as a backup 5. We'll have Asar as the 4-3, whatever, with Fontecchio or Tim Hardaway Jr. My question there, though, becomes, and I think, again, this bleeds over a little bit into, what the Pistons are going to do with the rest of their free agency. Who's your backup point guard? Who's creating the offense for you? Because I hate to like skip ahead, but like, I don't think either of us are going to come away from this podcast saying, boy, we sure were impressed with Marcus Sasser playing point guard in Summer League. Like, I think we'll talk about that a little bit more, but like not impressed. So I think that brings up like another interesting question is like, fine, you bring Ivy, you put Ivy in the starting lineup. Who's your backup point guard there? Because you look at that second unit, these are all guys who need to get the ball in order to be effective. They're not create your own shot type players. Like if Asar Thompson and Malik Beasley and Isaiah Stewart are driving their own offense, something is going very, very wrong for you. So I guess that's really, my question is like, one, do you think you're prioritizing Ivy over Asar by starting Ivy next to Cade Cunningham? Because I worry about that. I think Asar Thompson, from what I've seen, to me still is a higher upside player than Jaden Ivey, just based on what the team needs and where the NBA is right now. And two, like, what's the best way to maximize both of those lineups at this point in time? Where do you see it?
Well, I think you can play, and this depends on how JB Bickerstaff and the rest of the organization views Ivy, but if there is that idea of playing both those guys together, does it make sense to stagger them? Something that we talked about Monty Williams needing to do all season last year. And does that mean if you stagger them that Jaden Ivey can play essentially the backup point guard role? Does he come out 6 minutes into the game for Asar Thompson? So you do get Asar and Cade out there together. And then at the start of the second quarter, does he replace Cade and run the second unit? I think that's an avenue that allows Detroit to A, get both of them reps on the ball, allow them to start together, and C, it also allows them to play all of these wings that they've added this year, and to even maybe be able to sneak Ron Holland in the rotation for some minutes if that's in their plans. I mean, the minutes aren't there if they're gonna play Jaden Ivey as a backup too, and you have to give guard minutes, wing minutes to Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., Simone Fontecchio, Ron Holland. Like, there's a lot of guys vying for all of these minutes. They could go out and sign a backup point guard, and that does kind of take us into that second topic that we want to talk about with an open roster spot still left. Are the Pistons going to make another move? Are they going to make another free agent signing? Are they going to get involved in the trade market? They still have a little over $7 million in cap space. They still have their $8 million biannual exception. Like, they have the financial flexibility to make a move. Does going out and bringing in a Tyus Jones make sense? I think in one way it does, because it would give them a veteran point guard. It would give them a guy that can come in when Cade Cunningham's out and could carry the offense. And I think he makes sense in a way. But at the same time, if you do that, you're kind of pigeonholing yourself with what you can do with Jaden Ivey. So it's what way does the organization want to go? That's going to determine what makes sense for Detroit. I think starting both Cunningham and Ivey together makes sense. I think everyone can still get their fair share of minutes. There will be opportunities for Ausar Thompson and Cade Cunningham to play together. There will be opportunities for Jaden Ivey to play with the ball in his hands. And there will be opportunities to put Cade in lineups where there's a ton of floor spacing. There will be opportunities to put Cade in lineups where there's a lot of defense and size and length around him. I agree with you that it's all about maximizing Cade Cunningham and figuring out what suits him best. Because if he is the guy and they paid him like he's the guy, they have to determine what works with him. And whatever that combination is, if it is an Ivey, then yeah, you do look to trade Ivey. But I think they need to learn that for themselves still. I don't think that's already been determined.
Yeah, I think we're in total agreement on what the priority needs to be, right? I just think that I disagree personally with what you're saying in terms of starting Ivey. I just want to see him. I need to see him prove it. I need to see him prove it a little bit this year. And I think that in order to set Cade up for that success, especially in the early season, so that they don't go down a rabbit hole like they did last year, I just think that you have to surround him with shooters. And the best way to do that is starting Beasley and probably Harris Fontecchio, or God forbid, Tim Hardaway Jr., or even Ausar. Like, I think you can make it work with Ausar in the starting lineup. It's going to be interesting. They definitely have. It's not as bad as last year when it was like one guy goes down and all of a sudden you're playing Kevin Knox 30 minutes a night. But they definitely have a ball handling issue in the sense of, like, if one of Cade or Jaden goes down, boy, they are in real trouble. They are in real trouble. So I think backup point guard, I still think they need one. But like you said, like, I don't disagree with your assessment that acquiring a backup point guard definitely makes it harder for you to see what you're getting from Jaden Ivey. So I think they're in a very delicate position there. It's going to be very, very difficult for them to put together lineups that make a lot of sense. And at the same time, also, like, protect themselves against injury, because it is going to happen. We know it's going to happen at some point this year. It always does. So yeah, it's going to be tough. I just think that they need like one more ball handler at this point in time. I think we're probably in agreement on that. And that brings us to our second topic. Like you said, they have about two different ways to spend $7+ million on another free agent. Aaron, what would you like to see them do with that money? Or perhaps, would you even like to see them do anything at all with that money at this point in time?
Well, I think we know the way the Pistons want to go with it, at least with some of the cap space that they have. They did offer Patrick Beverley a veteran minimum contract. He declined it, went over to an overseas team, also turned down the Rockets, I think, as well. That was the other team that offered him an NBA contract. So I think we know they want to add another guard, another ball handler. And I think that makes sense because, look, even with Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, one of those guys go down, it does look a little thin at the point guard spot, with Marcus Sasser really being your only other option. Does it make sense to go out and spend and splurge on someone like Tyus Jones? Again, I think it does, and I think it doesn't. It's all about what you prioritize. But odds are these guys are going to miss games. Cade Cunningham has missed games in each of his first 2-3 seasons in the league. I know he missed some time at the start of his rookie year, missed all of essentially his second year, and then missed about 20 games in his third year. So he's going to sit some games out. So you're going to need another ball handler. It's just, do you go out and sign a guy that needs to be an everyday rotation player, or do you go out and sign a guard that maybe doesn't need to be in the rotation on a nightly basis, but is also good enough to then step in when his number's called upon for a handful of games or whatnot here or there. So I think for me, going out and signing another point guard does still make sense for this team. I just don't know when I look at the market outside of that Tyus Jones or Markelle Fultz, what else is really out there that's all that intriguing for this team? And that's where, to me, my mind goes to, are the Pistons still waiting something out in the trade market? We've been told since Langdon got here that the plan was to work the trade market, and they still have the cap space. They have these guys that have been in trade rumors. Could they make some sort of, consolidation trade to bring in something that they need and move off of Ivey, move off of Stewart or someone else and improve the roster in that way? So that's where my head's at. I'd be okay if they brought in Tyus Jones, but as I've mentioned, it makes it a little bit difficult to get all these other guys minutes because he is very, very clearly an every night rotation player. So my head's kind of twisted on what they're going to do. I don't quite know. I think there's a pathway where they do something in the free agent market still. I also very much believe that they're going to make another trade. They have the cap space to do it. Langdon, these guys, these players have been in trade rumors now for a few months. Like, I think there's something still there.
Well, I think first off, if Jaden Ivey plays well enough as a ball handler or shooter, I think you're almost certainly going to see one or both of Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley traded at some point this season. I just think it's inevitable given their contract situations and where the Pistons are at in terms of like their guards, swingmen, if you will. For me, while I hear what you're saying about Tyus Jones, and I think I agree, I think he's just going to need too big of a role for what they need right now. A guy that I would be really interested in, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I was so against them taking him on a couple of years ago when they did, Dennis Smith Jr. I think Dennis Smith Jr. is kind of exactly the type of player you're talking about there. He's a veteran who has been comfortable stepping into larger minutes and also sitting for extended periods of times, plays good defense, can distribute the ball. Yes, he's undersized, but he does a lot with what he is given. I've just been very impressed with like how he's grown since he left Detroit, even like within Detroit, where he started playing a lot harder on defense. So I think given what the Pistons need and where they're at, I think Dennis Smith Jr. to me would certainly be a player that would be worthy of a reunion, wouldn't cost you too much, fits a lot of what they need. And I think would probably be willing to come back here as well. So if that's one guy I'm throwing out there, because I agree with you, like I think Tyus Jones just needs too big of a role. And like you said, pigeonholes Jaden Ivey into another very specific role that doesn't necessarily behoove Detroit at this point in time where they're trying to evaluate him. So for me, Dennis Smith Jr., or like you said, go through the trade market, see if you can get somebody else there. I think that's why they went after like a Pat Bev. Like that's a guy whose NBA career was going to be over, whether by his choice, which it ended up being, or not by his choice in the next couple of years, was destined for a, fourth guard, fifth guard kind of role moving forward, and gives you a lot of what Dennis Smith Jr. does. So I would not be surprised to see Detroit offer him a contract or possibly go the trade route. But I think we're both in agreement. There has to be another ball handler in this rotation.
Yeah, agreed. I do like the idea of bringing in Dennis Smith Jr. I think what he gives you defensively, it's honestly kind of comical how much his career has changed, because he came into the league as this super explosive offensive weapon, and he was just touted as this Russell Westbrook style player. And now he's turned into a completely different player.
He's turned into a late career Russell Westbrook.
Defensive-minded, defensive pest, whereas like early in his career, he just didn't buy in on that side of the court. And God, that's I think a problem that a lot of players have. It's like they have the athleticism, they have the strength, they have the speed to be these really impactful defenders, but they just don't buy into it. Dennis Smith Jr. has kind of had to, otherwise he wasn't going to survive in the NBA. And now he is really, really good on that side of the floor. So I think that would be an absolute fine way for Detroit to use some of that remaining cap space and to use up that final roster spot that they have. But I do think another move is coming. Could certainly see it being in the trade market. But if they do go the free agent route, I do think Dennis Smith Jr. makes a lot of sense. I don't think they need to go big anymore. That was something that I think they needed to do. And then they brought in Paul Reed, which I think, I wasn't here last week to talk about it, but I think that was a good signing by Detroit, a good use of the waiver wire. It tells you that there were other teams interested in him if Detroit just took him off the wire and paid him the, $8 million annually, because they didn't let him get off that wire. They didn't let him go and negotiate with other teams because there were other teams interested. So I like the aggressiveness there. They liked Paul Reed. I think he gives them something really impactful defender and high energy guy. So like that move. So I think that kind of shored up what they needed at the center spot for now. I do think it's the point guard spot that they have to put up. They have a ton of wings. They have a ton of guys they can give minutes to, 2 through 4. So getting another point guard, I think, would be my priority for Detroit with that cap space and that roster spot left.
I think the Paul Reed thing also, to your point, like that opens up the ability for Detroit to potentially trade one of Duren or Stewart and still have a capable center in that rotation at the same time. Or if one of them goes down with injury, which very, very possible. I believe Isaiah Stewart's played more than 70 games once in his career, and Jalen Duren never has. So those are guys that miss games as well. Like, people like to talk about Cade going down with injury. Their center's power forward, if you will, if you're of the Troy Weaver school of thought. They miss a lot of time too. So I think, yeah, we agree with that. Paul Reed's good. I think the other thing, to your point, what you're saying in terms of Dennis Smith Jr., the way he reinvented his career, there's another very explosive young guard on the Pistons roster with defensive issues and buy-in, Jaden Ivey. So I think that, like, Dennis Smith Jr., yes, while he'd be a good pickup in terms of on the court, I think he could also potentially be a very good mentor, a veteran mentor for somebody like Jaden Ivey, who came in with the exact same, like, super explosive questions about the shot, questions about the defensive buy-in. I think Dennis Smith Jr. could potentially do wonders in terms of getting him to buy in and learn on that end of the court. Because trust me, dude, I watch it. Dennis Smith Jr. was terrible defensively when he first came into the league. He was awful, and he's turned himself into a very good defender at that end. Aaron, I think it's time to give not the people what they want, to give you what you want. And that is NBA Summer League action, baby. Aaron, it's been 3 games for the Detroit Pistons. They are 2-1. Are they still eligible? Could they still win the Summer League championship? I don't know this.
I believe they could if they win their final, like, not regular season, but like opening round, whatever. I'm not sure how they clarify it.
Well, it'll be out. It'll be happening after we release this podcast on Friday. But look, let's talk about it. I think there's been some players that have impressed us that we weren't necessarily expecting. I think there have been some players that have disappointed us that we also were not expecting to disappoint us. I think we should probably start off at the top, the guys that I personally have been disappointed by, and I think you have as well. Let's talk about Marcus Sasser and Ron Holland. Yes? Are you on the same page as me? I think those two guys have Holland a little less so, but I think both been kind of disappointing, haven't they?
Looking at it, not as a fan, a lot of people will go to bat for Holland and say this or that. He has struggled. He has, and obviously Marcus Sasser has as well. Both those guys not scoring the ball efficiently whatsoever. I mean, you look at Holland, and this is a lot of what came off to me in his G League tape was he's too aggressive hunting his shot, and he's just not efficient right now scoring the ball inside. He's not very strong with the ball either, at least from what we've seen in the summer league. He's going to the rim and he's getting the ball stripped. He's losing it in the air. Like, unless it's a dunk, the efficiency is just not there for him right now. And that's what concerns me, especially when you talk about adding him to this team that has gotten so much deeper on the wing this year. does he deserve minutes? How is he going to get those minutes when you just brought in Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., you have Asar Thompson, you have Jaden Ivey, like all of these guys that deserve minutes. And Ron Holland has come out in Summer League and, in the 2 games that he's played, hasn't really gone to bat for himself all that well. I'm concerned with it a little bit. I'm just being honest. I'd like to have seen him look a little bit more comfortable out there, and he's just tried to force the issue a little bit too much. It's just Summer League. We've seen a lot of players play very, very well in Summer League and go on to have very, very short-lasted NBA careers. We've seen a lot of players play very, very poorly in Summer League and go on to have great NBA careers. So I'm not saying it's the end of the world, but I'm seeing a lot of the same things that I saw in the G League tape that were part of my concerns with drafting Holland in the first place. With Marcus Sasser, this is a guy that I thought was going to come out and be too good for Summer League. He played a good amount of NBA minutes last year, has been given this opportunity to lead the Summer League offense, earn that role in Detroit's rotation next year. And he's just done the kind of exact opposite. The shot selection, the shot efficiency, both poor. He's not doing anything playmaking wise that's making up for that. And he's obviously just such a limited defender that even if he is trying on that side of the court, he's just too deficient because of his lack of size and athleticism on that end to truly make a difference. So that certainly has played a factor in our earlier discussions on the Pistons needing another point guard, because Marcus Sasser's just not a point guard, at least not right now. And it's really tough to be a 6', 6'1" shooting guard in the NBA in this landscape. And that's kind of what Marcus Sasser is, unfortunately. Just hasn't done enough for me in Summer League.
Yeah, I feel so much more strongly about the Sasser struggles than I do the Holland struggles, because honestly, for me, I expected Ron Holland to be in the G League for most of this year. I just think that's where he is. And I've said, like, I think he has such a high ceiling, but he's so far away from it now. And it's easy to see, even with like other guys that have struggled with efficiency. Think like, Matas Buzelis, a guy who is very commonly linked to Detroit. Like, he just looked so much more comfortable out there, despite shooting inefficiently as well. I know it kills you to see Dalton Connect just absolutely lighting it up as well. You and Tim Forkin just crying your hearts out. But yeah, I just look, frankly, I kind of expected to see this from Ron Holland. A lot of aggressiveness, a lot of effort, a lot of hustle. The results not necessarily being there at this point. And I'm okay with that. I think that he, showed some quick decision making. I think that he showed the aggressiveness that I want to see. I think he showed a lot of the skills and the talent that I was looking to see from him. Physically, he looks like an NBA player. And that goes a long way right now, because we knew that the overall skill set was not there. It's crazy that I'm saying about him after I already mentioned it with Asar Thompson. I like his midi jumper. I think he's got a nice little mid-range jumper, and I think that could be a piece of his game moving forward. But yeah, there's just so much that needs to come along. You can see it. I can see it. I think anybody who's being objective about it can really see that there's just a long road ahead of him. The good news is they don't need him right now. They have a heavy wing rotation, and they can afford to give him time to progress his game, whether it's with the G League team or if it's, just sitting on the end of the bench for most games and coming in and mop-up duty. That's okay. Like, you can give him the time, you give him the space, fine. Marcus Sasser, boy, Troy Weaver traded up for this guy. And it's just like, it's baffling. It's utterly baffling. It was a weird pick in the moment. We were like, fine, maybe we'll see. He's undersized. Maybe he'll show, because of his tenacity, that he's going to be able to be a good NBA defender, and he'll shoot enough to where you can, okay, maybe play him as an off guard. No. Disastrous pick. Absolutely disgraceful. This team looked better with Javonte McCoy running the offense than it did with Marcus Sasser. And if this guy's not hitting shots at an absurd rate, if he's doing anything other than not missing every shot he takes, he is a net negative on the floor. Can't play him defensively. You can't do anything else with him offensively. He does nothing else. He can only shoot. And he's not a good enough shooter to play him those minutes as an off guard because he's so limited defensively. And yes, while sometimes he'll shoot, there's times we saw it last year where he's afraid to shoot. He's just so, what a disastrous. I'm sorry. It's just like, what a foolish pick. And they traded assets for it when you had guys like G.G. Jackson still on the board. We'll see with Jordan Walsh, but you had such a dearth of wing talent last year. And instead of going after any of those guys, you took an undersized combo guard who can't pass well enough and can't play defense well enough to do anything useful for you out on the floor. And this is why we're talking about bringing in a guy like Tyus Jones, because this is a player that you took knowing that he had to play point guard, but he can't play point guard. He can't pass. He can't create offense for others. And it's absolutely absurd that is like what Troy Weaver left us with. Just crazy, man. Like, this guy could not make a late draft pick to save his freaking life. Yeah, I'll say this though. I liked what Javonte McCoy like gave them on offense. It was like, oh right, this is what a point guard does. Even Danis Jenkins, a guy who I think we're gonna talk about, and guys who impressed us, was doing more creatively. But Bobi Klintman's not even a guard, and he did better in terms of creating offense for others. So yeah, Marcus Sasser. Wow, what a disappointing showing it has been.
Yeah, Jenkins and Klintman have both stood out to me and done more than I thought that they were both capable of. I think Klintman showing the floor spacing is really, really important. I don't think he's getting NBA minutes right away, but showing that he can space the floor, showing the energy that he plays with. He's done a really good job on the glass as well. And like you mentioned, a little bit of like creativity from him, moving the ball, distributing a little bit. Like he's doesn't play, with tunnel vision in any sense of the imagination. He's done a lot of good things in summer league, and for the Pistons, that's important to get a young 6'9", 6'10" forward that can shoot, rebounds, plays with energy. I like what I've seen from him, and I really like what I've seen from their two-way guard, Danis Jenkins. That looks like a really good move by Langdon, one of those smaller moves, around the needle moves. But he scores, he shoots, he play makes, he defends, like a lot of good stuff from him. And he's been a much better guard in summer league than Marcus Sasser has for this team. So I like Jenkins, and I'm very interested to see how much of an impact he's going to make at the G League level. And if that translates to him eventually being able to come up and help an NBA team. I think some of the better organizations right now are using their two-way contracts, getting these guys in their system for a couple of years and developing them to the point where they can then come up and play an NBA role for them on one of those cheaper contracts. When you're spending all this money on your top 3-4 guys and you've got to fill out the rest of the roster, if you can spend 2 years developing a G League player, a two-way player into an NBA player, like, that's where organizations win. And maybe they'll be able to do that with Jenkins. The Pistons haven't done anything with their two-way contracts under Troy Weaver. They were, used as favors to friends. I'm sorry, Jasper, but that's what Buddy Boeheim was. Maybe this is a sign of change for them. And Jenkins in summer league has really, really stood out. So like what I've seen from him, and again, Klintman has impressed me as well.
I just want to say, Davidas Servidis was right there, and you chose to bring up Buddy Boeheim. I'm shocked and appalled that you would go after me personally like this. I thought we were on better terms. I don't want this to be like a Joe Budden podcast breakup thing. No. You're 100% right. And It's funny. Bobi Klintman has not played a single NBA minute. I'm already willing to say he is a better second round pick than anyone Troy Weaver did. That dude looks like an NBA player to me. I was very impressed from what I saw from Klintman out there, for exactly the reasons you said. He was spacing the floor, and I don't think that that's like a small sample size thing. He was able to shoot internationally and in college. He shot like 36% from three. He had really good form. I thought passing wise, that was the thing that really surprised me about him. His decision making was so quick, so quick. And that to me is like, I saw just a few of the passes he was throwing in the Philly game. Like, I know the assist numbers aren't like eye popping or anything. I think he's under 3 per game in summer league, but like the way that he was passing the ball, the looks that he was getting for other guys, I thought was really impressive. Like Jace Johnson is scoring what, 12 points per game? I think half of that is probably on Bobi Klintman alone, just for being able to get other players easy looks. I feel like I'm calling my shot a little bit early here, but like to me, that's an NBA player. He's the kind of guy that I could see if he's really given an actual chance with his size, with his ability, with his shooting. I could see him having like a 10-year career. Like that's exactly the type of player every NBA team needs on their roster. I know it's 3 summer league games. I'm very well aware I could look very stupid because he never steps foot on an NBA court. But to me, of all the Pistons players, he was the one who most looked NBA ready, more than Marcus Sasser, more than Ron Holland, more than anyone else. Like I saw him and I said, that guy's an NBA player, period. Like, look how big he is. Look how strong he is. Look how fast he is. Look how smart he is. Crashes the boards, gives great effort. I think for me, like, again, it's too soon to say exactly what he's going to be, but like, that looks like the potential to be one of those moves that we were clamoring for over the last 4 years in the second round. Like an actual high upside NBA potential player that might not give you what you want right now, but in a couple of years has the potential to be a legit rotation guy for you. So very, very impressed with him.
You mean it makes sense to use a top 40 pick rather than attach it to a useful NBA player in a salary dump trade for no reason whatsoever? Like, what a concept. I mean, I don't know.
If you say so, Aaron, but we're not getting paid millions of dollars a year to run a franchise into the ground. So what do we know?
That's crazy, man. What a concept. Last guy I really wanted to talk about. I'm not sure if there's anyone else that stood out to you one way or the other, but Wendell Moore Jr. brought into the team this offseason via trade. I really thought it was just, the Pistons made the trade to get the picks that they got in the deal. But he's still on the roster, playing with the team in Summer League. He's only played in 2 of the 3 games so far, but it's very clearly to me looked like he's looked in his first 2 years in the league and in the G League. He's just not an NBA player. Does not do enough on either end of the court and isn't shooting the ball the way he needs to. He's supposed to be this floor spacing, 2-3 at 6'5", 6'6", not hitting shots, doesn't very much look so confident out there with the ball in his hands trying to do anything. I get, again, this probably isn't a playoff team next year, but that's a guy that if I need to make some room, want to use some cap space, want to make this team better, I'd probably just eat the contract and cut ties with Wendell Moore based off what I've seen in Summer League and looking at what he's done in his first 2 years as an NBA player.
Yeah, I didn't see anything there. I mean, I thought other guys who are not going to make an NBA roster anytime soon, and like Javonte McCoy and even Jalen Slauson, like those guys showed me more than Wendell Moore Jr. did. I saw nothing from him. Yeah, I mean, I'll give a little shout out to Jace Johnson. Like that guy's also not an NBA player. Like defensively, no way. That guy was just getting cooked constantly. But good for him. Like he finished easy looks. He did exactly what he was asked to do. I just think that he deserves a little shout out. Like there's so many players that go to Summer League and don't take advantage of the opportunity to the best of their abilities. Do I think he's getting an NBA contract? No, but he very well could have played himself onto a G League roster. He very well could be getting an international contract. I thought he did a really good job. He did exactly what was asked of him. Just finish the easy looks, get to the basket, rebound a little bit. Good on him. Like, I want to give him a little shout out there.
He played with the Motor City Cruise last year, was a midseason addition. And yeah, I mean, he's just one of those guys that he's just not athletic enough to be an NBA player. He's too slow laterally. He doesn't, get up the ground very well. But around the rim, he rebounds and he can finish down low. And you appreciate that because those guys definitely stand out in Summer League because there are so many bigs that go out there. And you can clearly tell that they're out there because they're 7 feet tall. But that's the only reason why they're out there is because they're 7 feet tall. There's definitely a skill to what Johnson does. Again, he doesn't have the athleticism to be an NBA player, but he's either going to earn himself a sizable contract overseas or he's going to be a valuable player in the G League potentially for the Motor City Cruise next year. Anyone else or anything else that you want to talk about, Jasper, as we wrap up this week's show?
I don't really think there's much else. I mean, it's Summer League, man. I like the effort that the Pistons gave on both ends of the floor, especially defensively. This is clearly a very limited offensive team, like in Summer League. And they managed to squeak out 2 wins just based on effort and hustle. And I think that is good. I always like to see that, especially from guys that you're bringing in to prove something. You never want to see a lethargic Summer League team. That means something has definitely gone wrong, either from like a talent evaluation perspective or from a coaching perspective. That's always a bad sign. And these guys came to play. And I love that. Like, even the guys that we say struggled, and Ron Holland and Marcus Sasser, they went out there and they busted their asses. And I always think that's good. But yeah, number one thing I'm taking away from this, Holland's exactly where I kind of thought he would be. Bobi Klintman is way better than I thought he would be. And I'm very much interested to see what either of those guys will bring to the roster this year. So, yeah.
Well, the Pistons have one more game in Summer League before it's determined whether they play a consolation game or advance to the winner's bracket, the winner's tournament part of the Las Vegas Summer League. They'll play that on Friday night against the New York Knicks. We'll see if anyone's held out or if they play all of their guys. Just a quick note here. We didn't talk about him playing in Summer League, even though many probably would have expected him to. Asar Thompson did not play in Summer League, will not play in Summer League this year for the Pistons. He is playing basketball. He is, training and whatnot. He has been working with Pistons assistant coach Fred Vinson a lot, according to Trajan Langdon, but they are not playing him in Summer League due to the blood clots that he was dealing with at the end of last year, still working his way back. So just wanted to call that out in case anyone who isn't watching Summer League was wondering. But
sorry, Aaron, real quick. How do you feel about that? Like, would you rather him be out there and let's say no blood clots. Let's say it wasn't an issue at all last year. Would you rather have seen him out there in Summer League, or would you rather have him in the gym just working on that jumper nonstop?
Without a question, Summer League. There's plenty of other weeks and months in the offseason to work with the Pistons staff and whatnot, specifically on shooting and a few other things, whatnot. But getting that game competition, going up against other teams, playing in a scheme, playing with some of your new teammates, like that is super, super important to me. So I would have absolutely had him on the court if he was 100% and was conditioned and all of that. I get it's different right now with what the Pistons have said. But if he was healthy, year 2 player, very clearly has some things that need to improve in his game. He would have definitely been out there for me if I was making that decision.
Okay, just wanted to get your feeling on that. I don't feel too strongly about it either way, but I was interested to see where you came down. Especially since you're a Summer League czar. So
I'm all about guys getting reps. I'm all about the game reps. I'm all about getting that opportunity to go out there. And I think there's a real value to Summer League, like not just as someone that likes watching it, but I think it's important for player development. And I think it highlights, hey, this is what you can do well against professional level basketball players. Here's what you need to work on. And I do think there's value to that. But that is your Summer League talk. Likely for the rest of this offseason, likely until next year, unless the Pistons go on some championship run over the weekend and into the early part of next week. That's likely going to do it for your Summer League talk. I had a blast talking Summer League, but I also enjoyed talking about our other topics on this week's show. That's going to do it for today's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. Make sure to use our promo code Believe, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet of up to $250 at Bet Online. We will see you guys next week for another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. Take care, folks.